Golden mussels, Limnoperna, that is what we're talking about today. We'll just start off with the taxonomy. They are bivalves similar to a zebra and quagga mussel, but they are actually in a different family. So as you go down the lineage here, we're in the same group as zebra and quagga mussels, which everybody knows what zebra and quagga mussels is. Yeah, I figured this group, I don't have to tell you that. So that's the invader that really started North American aquatic invasive species programs that we've been working on since the late 80s and certainly since early 2000s here in the West. So we're in the same group, but they are in a different family, the Mytillidae family. And the genus here, as we said, is Limnoperna fortunii. So some of you may not care so much about the taxonomy, but I actually enjoy digging in a little bit to find out some of the differences there. Where do they come from? We'll just start with the first description and we'll move towards the present day. So 1857 was the first time that golden mussels was described by a scientist named Dunker from specimens collected over in China. That is their native range. Over the next 100 years, they continued to be documented in what was assumed to be the native range throughout major river systems in China, Thailand, Korea, Laos, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Cambodia. In about 1960s, there started to be documentation that they were expanding north in China, believed to be outside of their native range. So moving into the invasive range timeline, between 1965 and 1990, they were documented in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Japan, and are listed as invasive in all of those places and had documented negative impacts primarily to infrastructure. 1991 was the first detection in South America, and that's where a lot of the information that we're learning about golden mussels is actually coming from. They were first found in Argentina, and we'll kind of discuss how they've moved through a part of South America. And you can see up in that upper right photo, that is a photo from a hydroelectric power plant. And then it spread throughout South America, through major rivers in Argentina, Brazil, Bolivia, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Lots of ecological and infrastructure impacts. And then last October, not even a full year ago, our first detection in North America in the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta in California, and specifically the O'Neill Forebay. So I found this map from an article that was done in Science magazine, and I wasn't able to find a new one. It's actually a really good article. And it talks about some of the scientists that found the initial detection, but just to kind of show you, detection 1991, La Plata River, believed to have been brought in through commercial transoceanic shipping. They continued to kind of move upstream, believed to be a completely different introduction in the late 2010s, but both commercial shipping as well as recreational and just human use expanded. Main impacts had been observed in hydropower plants, but interestingly enough, we all know how the Amazon River basin is, right? We learn about that in, grades. Like you say, why is the Amazon River basin important? They'll say, because that's where the world's biodiversity is held, right? We learned that at a very young age, even here in North America. But of this recent event here in the Mantella wetlands, just in 2020, a South American coalition actually got together. So they found him in 1991, right? So it took 30 years to actually mobilize across these countries, and they created a strategy and a plan for management to specifically try to keep them out of the Amazon River basin. And of course, what happened in 2020, right, as they published their report? Pandemic and shutdowns and government funding cuts. And so everything you kind of read about the plan, it was a really great multi-jurisdictional, international effort, but so not a lot of it has unfortunately been implemented. But there's a lot of, I think, to be learned there, how they have moved. This is the global distribution from GBIF. I think you guys have the same map in your risk assessment. Native range, invasive range, and then here in North America. So first detected here in North America in California at the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta and the O'Neill Forebay in October 2024, believed to be introduced by international shipping into the port of Stockton. And California Department of Fish and Wildlife does a really good job of keeping all their sampling information public. You can access the map right from their website, and then you can click on the little points and you can find the information. They also have where they're sampling where they haven't found it, but it's been a massive overhaul in the last 8 months to just get boots on the ground to do this kind of monitoring. And there's multiple agencies involved. So there's still a lot to be learned and a lot of new dots coming on this map all the time because of that. We really don't know what the extent of it is throughout California. We'll zoom into this cluster up here in a minute, but notice just how far south, and again, I'm landlocked here, and so you all might know the coastline better than me, even though it's south of you. But the aqueducts, plants, the outlet, the forebay, we're already a state recreation area, major reservoirs. So the state water project is the real concern here. And as we can see, they've already moved a fairly tremendous distance through the water project. So that's canals and ditches and pumping stations that move this water all throughout Southern California for irrigation, hydropower, drinking water, municipal use, all the things, plus obviously fisheries and recreation. So there's a whole kind of there's almost two efforts. What we're kind of used to doing, what I used to do, which is prevention and containment by watercraft, right? That's the overland spread, right? Boat inspections was designed to stop the recreational boats or to intercept recreational boats with invasive species so that they can't move them overland, right? Lake Mead, we found quagga mussels thousands of miles from the last known detection in one of our largest national recreation areas in 2007. So we knew with shadow of a doubt, it's not this natural flow throughout the water body. It's people picking them up and moving. So that is a huge effort right now to make sure people aren't picking them up and moving them overland. But there's a whole nother effort going on, which is what folks in the Great Lakes are a little bit more attuned to because they've had mussels for so long in the Great Lakes and the Mississippi, is what do we do about the downstream spread, which is a completely different conversation that involves integrated pest management, involves chemical, physical, cultural, mechanical, physical, chemical, cultural, potentially biological control. It's a whole nother conversation, right? And as far as I know, that very much in its infancy. What can be done to stop the natural flow of these in the water system, especially given how far they've already gone? Let's zoom in a little bit to the kind of initial cluster here. When we zoom in, here's the Stockton, right? And here's the initial detections. But if you start to click on all these, on this map, it's a very small. When you zoom in, you can see how vast it really is. And you start to click on them, and they're boat docks, boat launches, ferry operations, irrigation ditches, non-motorized launches, canals, marinas, resorts, river sites, state recreation areas, state parks. There's several water district pumps that are infested, as well as yacht clubs. So when we think about containment, right? And I sit in my WID classes and I say, nobody's doing containment yet. When you dig into this, the on-site containment, like we try to do at Mead and Powell, really not feasible here. We really need to look at more of a broader geographic containment program, similar to how you all do perimeter defense for prevention in the Columbia River, right? That's a strategy you've used for prevention. And that's kind of the thought here is how do we put it? Because it's in all these systems, right? So on doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So how do we get around it? Is the geographic boundary that California is working with here. But it's not just one agency. Are these only confirmed detections of adults? Yes. It does include veliger samples, and as I know, they've had eDNA detections going back to 2024. So they've actually been getting eDNA hits for several years already prior to finding the first adults. But I'm not sure which of these are veligers, which are adults. Most of these, I believe, are adults. They're not hard to find anymore. Good for asking. Okay, so what are golden mussels, right? Let's talk about what they are now that we've kind of talked about where they came from and where at now. So, believed to have come over the exact zebra and quagga mussels did, just instead of the Great Lakes. into California through the port of Stockton. So international shipping, right? And then moved through that natural water dispersal, as well as hopefully not overland by recreational watercraft. A lot of my photos are from Division of Water Resources or are borrowed from Martha Volkoff with California Fish and Wildlife. So if you can't read credits, most of them go to those two agencies or people. I've seen Martha present probably half a dozen times in the last 8 months and have borrowed quite a bit of her content. So freshwater brackish water bivalve mollusks, shells, right? Color varies from light golden to darker yellow brown. Triangular, so similar in shape to zebra and quagga mussels. I got some and I'll give you contact. Look, I got a baggie of golden mussels and then I got a jar of golden mussels that California sent to me for educational. And I think the layman would probably be able to tell the difference, but that I've been working on zebra and quaggas for a while, and I know most of you have as well. I don't think they're too hard to confuse when I hold them next to each other. They really do. They look different. They're longer, they're kind of thinner. They don't have the striped shells. So I looked at them and I was, yeah, those don't look like zebra and quagga, but I have zebra and quaggas like all the desk and I look at a lot. So I may be biased. They are of light, broader temperatures and poor water quality. And so those are some of the big concerns, is that they have a broader habitat range. Places that support or are believed not to be suitable for zebra and quagga mussels are in fact often suitable for golden mussels. And we'll talk about why in a minute. They have the same main invasive characteristics as zebra and quaggas. They have byssal threads, which, remember, byssal threads are those spiderweb appendages. They're protein filaments that allow them to stick to a surface. And so we don't have those in adult mussels in North America, right? Zebra and quaggas are the only ones up until now, right? So byssal threads is the big deal. They can filter feed at a faster rate than zebra or quagga mussels. So typically the stat that we all refer to is a liter of water per day. These have been documented up to 3 liters of water per day. And they're kind of, that's a lot for something that's like a lot of water to filter, right? And everything I read says that they reproduce faster rates than zebra and quagga mussels, but I can't find the number, the number. We have these great quagga mussels, right? The million eggs spawn if only 10% survive. At the end of 5 years, you have 10 septillion mussels in the waterway. That great stat that some researchers somewhere figured out and we all say. So if you find those stats, send them my way because I'm looking for those sorts of hard numbers and I would love to have them. Okay, identification. They are sessile, like I said, of mussels. They are small, so max about 1.5 inches. I've seen different things say 1 to 2 inches. Dark brown above the umbonal keel, paler yellow-brown smooth shells. And the inner surface has this really pretty purple and white pearl layer, and that's very distinctive. The inside of a zebra and quagga mussel shell is nothing to write home about, okay? But these have this nice purple and white layer. The shell is smooth and shiny, upright. The shell margins are opposite of the attached side. This is one of Martha's diagrams that I really like. Dark brown above, light brown, yellow below, rounded interior and shiny exterior shell. Very sharp dorsal margin. And I have seen this in the photos and I can see it in some of the shells that I have now that I have some. Sorry. Where are we going here, people? I'm going the wrong way. My bad. There we go. They often really do have this kind of yellow. So if you look closely, there is often a yellow band kind of outside. An elongated, rounded, triangular. They kind of have some of the different characteristics of both quagga, but they don't have the stripes at all, and then that inner layer is really distinctive. Threads, byssal threads are a problem, right? And we all know that. So byssal threads equals invasive species. It's going to cost us a lot of money. All right, life cycle. So they do reproduce sexually in the water column. You need a male and a female. They release their gametes into the water column and fertilization happens in the water column. The initial life stage is a swimmable larvae. Similar to a zebra and quagga mussels, it becomes a planktonic veliger. So it's zooplankton. It's free floating in the water column. We can't see it with the naked eye. And it's consuming plankton and nutrients to grow. Once it takes on enough nutrients to build its shell, it develops a foot and has kind of an intermediate that's a little bit different quagga mussels, this plantigrade stage. And the foot, right? The foot is what actually allows it to swim. Zebra and quagga mussels don't do that. And so it has a little bit more of an ability as an adult to make decisions. I don't know how smart they are. It can actually move into more suitable spaces. Once it develops those byssal threads, it will attach to substrates. It can attach to much softer substrates as well. So it doesn't have to be the substrates we're kind of used to as zebra and quagga mussels. It's silt, like it doesn't need sand, things like that. Typically, the juveniles and adults, the literature says they stay in place. My friends at California DWR tell me that they don't. And they often will, that they move from one area to another. Substrate's full one day, and then the next week it's not, and they're all somewhere else, and they're not quite sure why that's happening. So it's really interesting, and they publish some of that information. Maturity is reached when the mussel attains a length of approximately 5.5 millimeters, so basically within the first year of their lifespan. And that is when they reach maturity, meaning that that's when they can start reproducing. If they can make it to a year, they can start creating more offspring. And so just to kind of diagram you again, initial life stage, same as a quagga mussel, microscopic veliger, cannot see it with the naked eye, free floating in the water column, and then goes through a metamorphosis with that plantigrade stage, becomes a settler, same as zebra quagga mussels, gonna feel like bumps that don't rub off, sandpaper like bumps, and then adults 1 to 2 inches in size. And then the cycle starts all over. So that cycle takes a year. Okay, so native range is humid subtropical with warm summers and no seasons. They can inhabit a variety of aquatic habitats, so lakes, rivers, streams, man-made systems as well. This table comes from the USGS's non-indigenous aquatic species, where they have species profiles for all our main AIS, including this one. And so you can see some of the kind of different that we have here. Depth, they do like shallower space than zebra and quagga, which are typically documented like 1 to 400 feet deep. Adult survival, they can handle a little bit warmer waters than quagga, but not too much. Their low threshold is the same. They can be right above the freezing, they could be right under the ice in the lake. They can't freeze themselves. So they can tolerate pretty cold waters. The larval development stages is a bit warmer than zebra and quagga mussels in terms of when they're spawning, 60 to 82. Quagga's has the lowest range around, I think, from that one. The salinity, the pH, and the calcium are kind of the big triggers, though. So they can tolerate about parts per thousand of salinity, and then less, about 6 to 9 pH is ideal. And then calcium all the way down to 1 milligrams per liter. It's like nothing. So they can build their shells with very, very little. And if we take a look at Martha's that she made here, you can see the comparisons, zebra quagga mussels on the left, golden mussels, and then the references for each of those stats over here. So you can see kind of some of these differences. A little bit warmer spawning temperature, zebra quagga is a little bit cooler, warmer here for the golden mussels. Pretty close on the salinity, but they can tolerate less salinity. They can tolerate lower pHs. They can tolerate, and I think that's like kind of low for zebra quagga. That's like the bare minimum. If it was like very low habitats, it's around 12. Good habitats about 18 milligrams per liter. So this is really the kicker here. This is the one that would knock a lot of waters out of the suitable range for zebra quagga, but for golden mussels and across California in their risk assessment found that their waters are within the suitable range for these suckers. But that's really the one that's kind of shocking us. DO, water velocity, and then life stage are a ligger as well. And then here's your kind of survival, right? So bare minimum survival reproduction. So calcium 5 is what the literature says. That one out of lab studies that they're doing right now, and they're going, wow, they can really make it pretty low. This survival is interesting because when we think about our boat protocols, the studies that we use for zebra quagga that are right now by actually a couple of different folks to try to figure out, are these temperatures and quarantine times suitable? But this survival up to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, right? The studies referred to for veliger death, we have veligers dying around 95. Hopefully with our protocols in the 120, 140 range, we should be in good shape. Sampling for the folks that are sampling out there, it's the same protocols as zebra and quagga mussels right now, with the exception of when you're doing the microscopy, you're looking for a larger veliger size. But we're doing surface surveys, right? I shouldn't say we is doing. I'm in it with them in heart and spirit. They are doing surface surveys, right? So out doing the existing structure, feeling the existing structure. That's where they're finding a lot of them. Artificial substrates, we also call those settler traps, right? So they're making the settlers, and you guys are pros at this. You got all the great videos online that teach people how to do this. The plankton toes, looking for the veligers, and then running, under the microscope. So right now, same protocols. You have to kind of have a different, viewpoint. But how did they, by doing this? They found them doing what we're doing for zebra and quagga mussels, right? They didn't decide one day, hey, we're going to go out and do this new thing to see if there's a golden mussel there. They were doing early detection for invasive mussels. So keep doing what you're doing. Just know that now your search target is broader. And we now have 3 with Bissell threads we need on the lookout for. Okay, so impacts. They're relatively similar to zebra and quagga mussels, like turn it up. Unfortunately, because of that broader habitat range, they can tolerate more pollution, more light, lower calcium, lower all of those things, and presumably faster reproductive rates. So 80 to 200,000 per meter is being documented, rapid, and the ability to attach and clog with threads. They're filter feeders. There's quite a bit of information from South America showing. In fact, I read this one anecdote from a scientist that he was a teacher, he took elementary students out to this one reservoir, and if I could see my notes in the slide, I'd probably be able to find the name. But he had been doing that for 30 years, and he would be able to go out and they would find more than a dozen native mollusks without having to really look hard. And now he says it takes him like several hours to find just like a dozen native specimen. He just not there anymore. And so you really dig online, you find some of these anecdotes in different kind of not our traditional scientific journals, and is somewhat that very first detection in Argentina. Within 10 years, they had over 86,000 in that space. So it just that, and you don't know, right? Detection versus don't know, right? How long were they there before he found him in 1991? But that colonization, when that happens, just like with quagga mussels, it's right. So it's impacting the food web, it's changing the chemistry of the water, lots of correlation with harmful algal bloom increases, which is already kind of a major issue for us, at least in my space and others, as well as that clogging of water distribution and supply systems, limiting and all of that good stuff we always talk about with zebra mussels. Okay, so boats, right? If you've been to my wood training, you've seen this map. This was made back in 2024. So it is a little bit limited in terms of now we have a lot more inspection stations available to us in California, and more coming online every day. But for you up here, look at right. This shows here's the location of that initial detection. And this is where inspected after leaving the Delta. And these are people, because there's no inspections at the Delta, right? So these are people that said, I was at the Delta, I was in this area, right? And what they said on their survey when they came in or Oregon or Idaho or wherever they came in. And so at this time, without having all these other stations, Lake Berryessa was the highest. And for those of you that don't know, they're right next door. And they were actually the first to intercept a golden mussel infested watercraft. So no surprise there. Luckily for all of us, Berryessa actually had a prevention program, and that's through the Solano County Water Association, which is a partnership between Solano County and Napa County. I'm learning about all this great California jurisdictional information now. But they had a ZQM program. And so they were in my class, they were one of the first folks that were learning about golden mussels. All of a sudden, people started calling me about Halloween. They're like, I want to take the golden mussel class. And I'm like, that's not a thing. It's a thing now, friends. But they were the first, and this is why. And then they, of course, they're right next door. So thankfully, we're able to just amplify the program. They added decon, which they didn't have. A lot of agencies in California are just inspection. So adding decon is one of the things that folks have been trying to do over the last eight months or so. They've also certified more than a dozen in their immediate vicinity can take overflow boats that they are working with. So they've come to my class and they have an agreement with, because there's no statewide program to manage this like you have in Washington, that doesn't exist in California. So each agency has to do that for themselves. So they have actually done more than a dozen businesses. They've come to class and gotten certified, and they're working directly with them to say, okay, we need overflow for decon so that they can get the decons done and not have to handle them all on site. But they've really revved up their program. Not surprisingly, Lake Tahoe, right? Where's Tahoe? Right here. So pretty close and pretty popular, yes. A beautiful, beautiful place. And so they were number 2 on the list, and yet they have intercepted a golden mussel boat recently. The other ones are new programs, and we'll talk about those in a minute, but you can see kind of California, Oregon here, Wyoming, here's Washington. That's where you're found, right? Pasco. So Utah, Oregon, so quite a few, right? Nevada. So this is what I'm interested to see what this map looks like next year, now that we have so many more WID stations. Because again, we don't have, what's the word I want to say? But people are voting. We only know where we're, right? Where we're documenting the inspections. Okay, so let's talk about these interceptions. As far as I know, and it says 2020, you think you had a possible intercept of golden mussels. Is that right? 2020? It's possible, right? Cool. I'd be curious if anybody can go back and find the photos. I have photos of it. That would be fun to go take a look at. Now I want to go back through lots of different because we've intercepted false dark mussels before, we've intercepted barnacles, like intercepted stuff, and so now it's like we used to, well, it's not zebra or quagga. False dark mussels we would ID, but anyway, let's get back on here. Okay, Lake Berryessa. So again, this was the first interception, and surprise given that they're highest on that list, and they had a program, right? So they were already out there to do these interceptions. They were out of lake. That's interesting. Okay, April 30th, right at the start of the season, Pleasure Cove was actually a commercially hauled houseboat. This was not a recreational, owner hauled vessel. It was out of the water for days, but according folks there, it was pretty dirty and wet. They actually had a conversation, and they were supposed to be came. So they were, again, commercially hauled from the marina. The marina is part of the program. When they got there, regardless of the fact they were supposed to clean, they did the interception and they found mussels. So they got a full decon, and per California law, they were quarantined. And I'm told that this boat actually had to go to service because it was really just quite infested. And so there's just a couple of photos here in the intakes, and this is like on the underside of the hull. They're super zoomed in, so they're a bit hard to see, but obviously you can see the mussels. It's pretty clear what they are, right? Or at least that they're attached invasive mussels with byssal threads, 2 shells. Okay, so Lake Folsom State Park in the Gold District of California system intercepted first mussel boat on May 6th. This was no joke, 1 week after they opened, following a mandatory 30-day quarantine. So they came to class in the spring, got their training all the way through level, did a 30-day quarantine, kicked everybody off the lake for 30 days, banded them all, so nobody gets back on unless you've got our band. And a week after they opened, they intercepted a golden mussel boat. It's a brand new program. A lot of us have a lot of time and experience, water decons and inspections before we intercept our first boat. But these folks are catching them oh my God, we opened a station, here it is. It makes you kind of wonder, okay, hopefully they haven't been coming in. This was in Folsom Lakes area at the Beals Point WIDS. And really, this is a program that I got to applaud, because they have gotten their program up and running so stinking fast with very little resources. I'm seriously impressed with the state park staff there. They're top notch. The vessel was from the Sacramento, San Joaquin Delta. They got a full decon, a quarantine per state law. So this one, though, again, so this one was commercially hauled. So they didn't actually, this was from the Delta as well. Yeah, okay, but they knew it was out of the water in 60 days, but they didn't know when it actually was in the water. That was the question. I was like, what was the question on that one? It was like they didn't know. This one was pretty fresh. And there's just more, some more of the boat just closer up. So I would expect to find with a zebra quagga mussel boat. They're in right angles, they're below the water line. Look at all of these are right angles. They're below the water line, underneath the boat, in the dark spaces, in the hidden spaces, right? It's what we would expect, what we've been seeing with okay, Lake Oroville. So this is actually the state's second largest reservoir in California as a water resources reservoir, and they have contracted to a company called Dudek to run their inspection program. We have trained about 80 people in the last month for them to get them up onboarded and to get everybody up and running. So they are brand spanking new. They opened on May 15th and boom, May 22nd. Here it is. Golden mussels on a boat. It didn't take long. So this is a pontoon boat. It was owned by residents. It was brought in by local folks from Oroville. They got the, information through the local networks about the changes to the program. They didn't close. They just May 15th there were inspectors on the ramp. We did a training May 13th and 14th, and May 15th they opened, and we've been training every week since. Because they don't have a bench, right? They're starting from scratch, right? They don't have infrastructure yet. In fact, Tahoe loaned him a decon unit to help him get up and running. So this is really a very important place because again, it's the second largest reservoir. It's in the state water supply. It's got a hydro. There's all sorts of information about this place. But anyway, a week later, they intercepted the boat. It was a pontoon boat. They had purchased it online and it was delivered to their house. And then they brought it into the reservoir for their inspection. The way Oroville operates, like a lot of these California places, because they're just figuring it out for the time now, and they're all independent. They're just taking their own seals. They're not taking anybody else's seals. And so we came in, got the inspection, no unverifiable water, but they found the mussels. Went for full decon. Because they're a contractor, they're not to touch them or decon it themselves. So Fish and Game officers had to come in and implement that Fish and Game rule. And the game wardens seized that vessel, deconned it, and quarantined it per their law. It was purchased from the Delta. It was in the water for an unknown period of time. So both of those were like new purchased boats coming in. So I find that really interesting. Okay, and then Tahoe's the recent, and they certainly amplified this one in the news. I saw this in a bit of news, but Tahoe's good at that. They get their stuff like in the national news. I don't know. They got some great PR people. This is just May 30th. Alpine Meadows Inspection Station. It was a 46-foot boat. I don't know what type of boat, but it was an inboard, and they found the golden mussel right here on the propeller shaft. And the vessel was from the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta. They did a full decon. Some of the media said that it was quarantined. They also said it was a 68-foot boat, but then issued a correction and said, no, it was deconned and we did not quarantine it because that was what they found. That's it. That's what they found. So, but that's the big interception, right? So 4 boats. And I checked in with Robert, who runs the see if there were any other. He says that for just discussing on the whiskey call. And as far as everybody knows, there has not been an interception outside of California. So these are the only 4 we know about. And I did check back in with a few folks in California to say, hey, anybody else find a mussel boat and didn't put out a press release just to see. And as far as we know, these are the 4, but there will be more, right? And there very likely could be Washington or here in California. I don't keep saying too much California stuff. I might need to relocate. And my daughter's looking at colleges in California, so it's like it's all about Cali right now. Although there's 3 schools in Washington on the list, so maybe I'll be coming to you. Okay, so just to kind of close up here with a little bit of what Martha has been sharing response. They very quickly formed a golden mussel task force. You guys probably know, I don't know if you already, so just want to share it. I know Washington has been probably the most proactive in terms of how quickly you did your statewide risk assessment. And that's truly an example that other states need to model. So we need to kind of shop that around a little bit, right? How we took that national risk assessment horizon scan from Fish and applied it to your state. I think it was really well done. I'm not presenting on it because I think you could do a better job presenting on it than I could, but hopefully you're all familiar with it. If not, I will throw it in the chat because it's just a lot of great information there. So golden, they have a task force, they an emergency prohibition because when they were found, they were on the prohibited aquatic invasive species list, that their boat inspection rules didn't apply. So they couldn't quarantine a boat for golden mussels because they could only quarantine a boat for zebra quagga. Now, our rules here in Colorado are a little different. We have an allowable list, so we can kind of say, well, no, anything that's not on this list, we can do it for, but they didn't. So that was a big deal. We also have the Felici Act, but it's kind of stuck now in the process. It went through as far as I know, Justin, it made it through public review and then should be green lighted, but it's just kind of stuck in federal bureaucracy at the moment, is my understanding.
Yeah, all the comments I reviewed were positive, negative, so hopefully that moves forward.
Yeah, great. And thank you for posting the link to the screening there. And then, strategy, right? Because we do in government, we write plans, right? Because we need them. I say that a little bit jokingly, but also lovingly. There's just a lot of different agencies, right? At least there's 4 different state agencies authorized in the state AIS law with different authorities. And so then you bring in all the private folks that own marinas and resorts and irrigation districts and all the things, and you gotta have a piece of paper that everybody's bought into in terms of how are they gonna do this, right? And what does that mean for the rest of us, right? Because in containing the Delta, then we have heavy lifting to do on the prevention side, right? We don't want these guys, so we got up our efforts for sure. So, there's some immediate things that are happening, right? And outreach. You can contact the California Division of Waterways, the boat inspection grant program, and they will send you packs of new cards that help you identify mussels and apart from golden mussels. And so there's lots of education and outreach going on. Monitoring has probably been the biggest push these early days. Keep in mind, it's been 8 months since we found them, right? So that's the biggest push, I think, where I've seen the most kind of staff and resources go to across jurisdictions. Let's figure out where these things really are. So that has been a huge push and will continue through this year. And I think the end of this, hopefully, we'll have a better understanding, because it's not just the state and the state water project. It's all the agencies that are out there straits and working their docks and trying to find them. I've even been hearing from homeowners, how do I build and how do I do this, and trying to protect, right? And then prevention, and it says partners prevention because, again, there's no coordinated WID program in California. So while there are requirements for prevention and containment planning and law, certain reservoirs have to have prevention plans. Certain reservoirs, if they meet criteria, need to have containment strategies. It's not coordinated the way you guys do it or the way a lot of Western states do it. That's not disparaging, it's just the reality. And then there's a lot of legislation and funding needs, right? If you're going to try to tackle this above what you're already doing for zebra and quagga mussel, then obviously we need resources, right? California needs resources, and they need a different strategy for control, because again, we can work on that overland spread by recreational boats, but how we keep villagers from just completely clogging up the state water system is a different conversation that's going to involve chemicals and all sorts of other things potentially. And so people are really asking the question, right? Like, is eradication even an option, right? You guys saw that map, this game, right? Is eradication really an option? And I'm sure there are some folks out there, yeah. And I think with new technology, it well could be. There are some folks that have been working for now 20 plus years on CRISPR and genetic work in South America that there's information there, right? Could they, we talk about the zebra and quagga mussels, we've never gotten there. Can you in some way that it won't reproduce, or it will produce only males, things like that. I don't know. That's smarter than A grade. But those are the sorts of folks are looking at, not the typical, we're going to just water and treat the dead pool and, do that sort of thing. That's not what we can do in the Delta. Keep in mind, has a lot of quagga mussels. A lot of quagga mussels in Southern California. And so I used the folks that are like, yeah, we have quagga mussels. We don't really do containment, but we need to prevent mussels. And I'm like, don't understand. I'm like, does not cut AIS move on boats. This is really simple, but I guess not. Containment is obviously a challenge, right? Water conveyances, these interconnected watersheds, literally hundreds of unmanaged, lots of private ownership, many jurisdictions, huge proximity to unconnected waters and the commercial shipping vector, as well as the recreational use. So it's an agency issue, right? If you want to prevent mussels from getting into your waterway, it's kind of on you in terms of what you need to do if you're a California entity. So, some of these coming online, right? And I kudos to them. It's going to take them a little bit to really fine tune it, right? You guys have it fine tuned right off the bat. Now you do, because you've been doing it a while. You've been working across jurisdictions, and you have really cool things like the Invasive Species Council and other groups to different jurisdictions together and have hard conversations and find ways to solve problems, right? They're just not there yet. So just kind of keep that in mind. I think they're on the right path, but it's going to take them a little while to get really settled out. So it's every reservoir kind of for themselves right now. And then obviously lots of education. They have something called banding stations. So for those of you who work at inspection and decon stations, you may get folks from California that are like, yeah, we just went to a banding station. What that means is that they got a seal, what we call them seals, call them bands, that little thing that locks the boat to the trailer so they can't launch, but they don't do anything. They don't lift the boat, they don't touch the boat, they don't drain the boat, they don't decon the boat, they don't inspect the boat. They just put the band on. It's just for you to know, hey, they're from California, and you do your normal inspection and make sure that boat clean, drain, dry, like all of you are so good at doing. Here's our national map. I hope it stays this way. I hope we don't wind up or in the Mississippi Basin or up here where you live. California, if you're vacationing out there, they have their hotline, and you all probably some of you on this phone call this number, but that's where we were reporting in Washington if you see zebra quagga or you think you find golden mussels or other AIS. And then, this website is where California is keeping things up to date, and I really do think they're doing a job of that, trying to just different stations, all the different monitoring, the different research. So that's where you can kind of dive in and get some more information. All right, and that's what I have for you today. Thanks for listening to me chat about golden mussels.